Hey Covalence friends. So when I created the restaurant roulette application, I intended that for developers to learn about, the range input, but also calculating random elements from an array with weighted averages so you could provide a little more custom input into the outgoing results. But since creating those videos, I've had requests from a few non-developers into making the application a usable one for them to where they can create their own restaurants to allow for their own inputting, to be able to remove restaurants, to be able to reset weights. So there's a lot of functionality that this application can hold that I would love to implement in this video today. So looking at the old application itself, it was custom built, tailor-made for me because I was getting hungry and I needed to make a choice. So I built it with just a few things in mind. Now, the goal for this is first, I want the ability to reset the weights so that way everything can go back to the initial 0.5 value. Secondly, after that, what I want is for the ability to add restaurants and remove restaurants. And then my third and final one is the ability to persist changes by saving them in local storage. And that way for this production application, anyone can actually go to this URL, and instead of seeing my choices, it's just going to load your previously saved choices. So I just wanted to make it a little more user friendly for everyone. So let's go ahead and hop into that. It's always kind of fun when you develop an application and it was something that you intended as just kind of a quick one-off thing and people enjoyed it and were like, hey, can you add some extra features? So I was really excited when I had some of those come in. Now, the thing that I said I wanted to approach first was creating a reset button. So let's go ahead and start defining that function. And thankfully that one's pretty easy to implement. All we'll need to do is map over restaurants, and for every restaurant object, return that object with the weight set back to 0.5. So that kind of just rebalances everything for our users. And that's going to be a button click inside of a div. I don't really have any form structure here, so there's not really a whole lot of event handling I need to care about, so we actually don't need to pass in a function argument for this. So what we'll do is we'll set restaurants to restaurants.map, and for every restaurant object that we do have, we will implicitly return that object spread out into this new object, and the weight property reset to 0.5. So this gets it back to the normal values. I'll put a button right here to the left of this button, so they'll be adjacent. On click, this will handle reset. And this one will say reset weights. So let's go test this functionality out. I need to get our server up and running first, however. Vite blows my mind at how fast it is compared to a lot of other bootstrapping projects. So, all right, and there we go. We've got everything resetting the way we want it. Cool. So for the input, what I'm envisioning now is maybe something beneath these buttons and directly above the restaurants. So let's look at setting something up like that. I need to create a piece of state to hold a new restaurant name. So and we'll go ahead and tie this value to that piece of state. tie this input to that piece of state. And on change accordingly update that piece of state to the event.target.value. And I could put another button alongside it, but I kind of like how the UI is fairly minimalist. I might just make a span with like some text or something alongside it. Let me see how that looks. We'll make it green. Maybe like a plus symbol or a check mark, maybe a little bit bigger. Let's see, font size. 1.5 rem. Maybe 2. Try not to get too nitpicky about style. Oh, especially since it's going to be top line. Oh no, way too big. Alright, I'll leave it at this for now, and we'll go ahead and focus on the coding functionality versus me nitpicking some styles for, you know, this video. I'll end up like doubling the video length if I start poking around styles too much. So all we need to do for this is start adding in the functionality to add our restaurant to the array of restaurants. So we'll need 2 function handlers. One I'll call handle add restaurant, and that's going to be the result of us clicking on that add button. No need for a function argument there. I'll also have one called handle remove restaurant, and that will provide the string name of the restaurant as an argument, and we'll just do some array filtering there. So for handle add restaurant, what we're going to do is set restaurants to an array where we spread out the existing values, and then we create a new object with the name of new name and a weight of 0.5. What we should also do is some input validation, just making sure that new name isn't empty. So if not new name, we'll return early. And correspondingly, just as a nice little UI UX kind of thing, we should also clear out this input. That way somebody can't like keep on clicking the button after they submit it once and just have it like infinitely submit the same thing over and over. So we validate that it's not empty to stop, you know, empty submissions, and then at the end of this we empty it out to prevent multiple submissions. Alright, so we'll go ahead and add this to our span over yonder on click. Handle add restaurant. And correspondingly, I'll want to create maybe like a red X to the side of the restaurant name itself to be able to remove it. A big old red X on the side. I don't think it would be fitting between the name and the input, and I don't think I would like it over here on the left side as well. So Yeah, let's do that over here. And we're deleting, so it's got to be red to show that it's some spicy functionality. Font size 1.5 RE. I'm just going to keep it consistent. And I'll do lowercase x, just so size-wise it's more consistent with the plus symbol. All right, on click, we'll go ahead and attach it to the functionality of the handle remove restaurant. And this actually does require a string argument, the name of the restaurant, which we have scope of within this map as the rs restaurant object dot name property. It's not too bad. I know that so many of you are like scratching your eyes out because like this is not vertically aligned based off like the center of the input. So everybody's probably clawing their eyes out, screaming at me saying, center align it. And here I am. No. All right. So what we're going to do here is we'll set restaurants to the current restaurants. And instead of creating like a temporary array and doing like find index to find the index of where in the restaurants array we have the restaurant.name equaling the same argument, we can just use filter here because the names we pretty much should be treating as like unique entities in a list of restaurants anyway. So what I'll do is we'll return restaurants in this filter only where the restaurant.name does not equal the name argument we passed in. So that's it. That is our very quick way of removing a restaurant from the array. And then testing out all of our functionality, making sure everything works together. Cool. So functionality-wise, all that's left is to save. So if somebody wants to use this website and they set up all their restaurants very carefully, they add some custom ones in, they remove all of the initial ones I provide. Well, if they refresh the page by closing out of their browser and reopening it, or just hitting refresh, or leaving it for a week or so and coming back to it, it all of a sudden goes back to this initial state, which kind of sucks from the user experience perspective. So what I want to do is save everything to state. And I'm kind of torn. I'm not sure if I want to have a button that saves or if I want to have everything update on every state change. I might end up doing that. We'll see how that pans out. But I think I am more a fan of that, just because that's less involvement, less input required from the user. So. Alright, I know it's goofy, but I'm defining a constant for my local storage, saving and retrieving. So what I want to do is define a use effect here. But one without a dependency array, meaning this is going to execute upon every state change. It's fine to do this if you're not setting any state in this use effect itself. So I want every state change to trigger a re-render or a rerunning of the saving. Now that I say that though, we have new name being an input that updates state, so that was kind of silly of me to say like, hey, let me not do that. Let me actually just watch the restaurant's piece of state. So every time restaurants updates, we'll go ahead and set everything up. Let me take this initial like seed data and cut it out. And we'll do that so we can do some conditional establishment and say like, oh, if localStorage.restaurants doesn't exist, that means the user hasn't saved any data yet. So let's go ahead and say store is equal to localStorage.getItem storage key. So if that does exist, we'll go ahead and set restaurants to that, else we'll set it to this giant default dump, which I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these elements here. I also need to tell TypeScript what restaurants is, so I gave it the initial state previously of this array of these objects, so it inferred that. But right now, its initial value is an array of nothing. It's an empty array, so it's going to assume it's an array of the type never, and that means that everything down here as well, like any state setters or anything that's trying to derive that, is going to not know what should be in there. So let me also define an interface for restaurant. Name property string, weight property number. And for this useState, we'll give it a generic of a restaurant array. All right. So it's going to pain me to remove so many of these wonderful restaurants all at once. Okay, I'm going to be a little more selective. I want to keep some of these in. I know it's going to be like test data and like sample data for everybody that's not Birmingham based, but it does kind of break my heart to have to remove some of those. Anyway, we've got our initial restaurant state getting set there. And if the store does exist, you know, we're just going to be JSON stringifying all of the restaurants state. So we'll just go ahead and... Oh, wait. Here I am doing kind of my initial use effect, loading up the state. So this is going to be completely different from saving it. So what I want to do here is JSON parse store. Yeah, so I don't know what I was thinking, because I was talking about like saving and then I was going to work on the loading feature. Here I am working on the loading feature first. So this use effect, I just want to be the initial use effect that runs after the first render. So we start off with an empty, array for our state. We have our first render, our use effect kicks off, and then we try to find the store's presence in local storage. And if it does exist, we go ahead and parse that data and set that to restaurants, and if it doesn't exist, we put up that temporary state. So that's all we need to do to load that data from local storage into our state. And for saving it, we're basically just doing the inverse. Now, I did say I wanted this to run without user input, so I do want a second use effect here that this will watch restaurants, and any changes to restaurant get automatically updated and saved to local storage. I do not want this, however, to run after the initial render, because if it tries to set everything in the restaurant state to local storage, I'm just going to be setting an empty array there, and so I don't want that to mess with the initial load. So what we'll do is just check for the truthiness of some property of that state. And so this is a pretty common pattern to employ if you want something to observe a change on a piece of state, but except for the very initial render. And so that's what we can do here. Say, okay, well, if it's an empty array, go ahead and return. So we need to say localStorage.setItem. Well, we've got that storage key defined, so I don't, accidentally typo the word restaurant in local storage, or restaurants, whoops, plural. So had I been typing that out manually, I would have typoed it and screwed it up already. Thankfully, if I screw up typing out the variable storage key, it's going to let me know very, very quickly. And here we can just JSON stringify restaurants. So upon every change to it, it's going to go ahead and update. So this does all of the responsibility of setting after the initial render. This does the responsibility of loading just after the initial render, but only for that, very first one time. And if we go check everything out, if I delete hotbox, and if I refresh my page, I should only see hotbox, gone now. If we look at local storage, we've got all of our restaurants here. If I remove Paramount, if we look at local storage again, Paramount is now very unfortunately gone. But that does mean that if I refresh the app, that data persists. If I do pizza, it's in local storage. If I refresh, it stays there. So we now have some persistent data, just making it a little bit nicer. That's kind of a final feature. We should also have some key events here, because thinking about mobile devices, it's kind of annoying to maybe tap this plus as your only way of submitting data. So waiting for the enter key to submit this would also be really nice, and that's also something that's easily done on a mobile device as well with the enter key on a mobile keyboard. So input on key down. Let's go ahead and define a function called handle submit down, or handle submit on enter. And we're typing, so it's a keyboard event on an HTML input element. And if the E key, if the event key is enter, if the enter key was pressed either via, a regular keyboard or mobile device, we can go ahead and execute the handle add restaurant, function. We'll just invoke that. So all right, let's test out that functionality. So get rid of pizza here. I want to add Paramount back and hotbox. Cool part about that enter submission too is if you click out, the focus remains on the button, but if you hit enter, the keyboard focus remains in the input itself. So if you had to type out a bunch of stuff, everything stays focused on that. So it's pretty nice. All right, but let's see, quality of life features. I don't know, that's about all of the common requests that I got for this application. I might do some more UI polish, but I think that's just about it as far as features that I was asked about. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you have any feature suggestions you'd like to see for this, please feel free, because it was actually really, really fun developing it the first time, and it's been fun developing additional features for it for the second time. So please, I am all ears. Anyway, go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, and we'll catch you later.